The night my oldest boy lost his fight with brain cancer, it felt like my whole world collapsed. My parents had already turned their backs on me. My ex-wife laughed when I begged for help, and I ended up trying to hold everything together until I couldn't anymore. I came dangerously close to ending it all, but I didn't. Something in me refused to quit. I decided to keep going for my younger sons. I thought the worst part of my life was over, but 1 week later, someone knocked on my door, and that sound changed everything I thought I knew about family, about love, and about what it means to survive. My name's Dylan Keaton. I'm a father of 3 boys, or I was, until cancer took one of them from me. My oldest, Logan, was 14. He had a quiet fascination with the stars, how they stretched endlessly across the night sky like they were full of secrets just waiting to be found. My 5-year-old twins, Asher and Eli, were all energy and laughter, too young to grasp the weight of what we'd lost, too innocent to understand why I couldn't stop crying some nights. My parents, Thomas and Grace, are still alive, but in truth, I lost them long before I lost my son. They've always seen me as the family disappointment, a man who never measured up. Then there's Rachel, my ex-wife. She walked away from our marriage, and from our kids, chasing a life she thought would make her happier without us. This isn't some story about strength or heroism. It's about being shattered, about reaching out for help and finding none, about losing the most precious thing you have and somehow still waking up the next morning. It's about the day I nearly gave up, and the day a stranger knocked on my door and turned all that pain into something I never expected: hope. If you'd met me a few years back, you'd have seen a man who thought he had life figured out. I was 38, teaching history at the local high school in a small town where everyone knew everyone. I had 3 boys who made me proud every single day, even though raising them alone wasn't easy. I lived paycheck to paycheck, juggling bills and groceries, but I never let my boys feel like they were missing out. My life was simple, maybe even boring by most standards, but to me, it was everything. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of an old brick building. The place creaked in the winter, and the pipes clanked like they were about to give up, but to my kids, it was home. It smelled like crayons, pancakes, and laundry soap. We filled it with laughter, messy art projects, and piles of library books that always seemed to grow overnight. Logan, my oldest, was tall for his age with a mop of brown hair that refused to stay flat no matter how hard he tried. He had a gentle heart, always noticing when I was worn out and offering to help before I even asked. His passion was the stars. On clear nights, we'd sit outside on our small balcony, bundled in old jackets, peering through a second-hand telescope I'd found years back. He'd trace constellations with his finger, eyes wide like the universe was speaking directly to him. "Dad," he asked once, "do you think there are other kids out there looking back at us right now?" I told him I believed there were. He smiled, and for a second, it felt like the whole world made sense to him. Then there were the twins, Asher and Eli, 5 years old and pure chaos. Asher was bold and restless, always pushing boundaries, while Eli was curious but more careful. The two were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences, inventing games that made no sense to anyone but them, and exhausting me to the point I'd collapse on the couch, pretending they'd finally defeated me. Raising twins was equal parts madness and joy, the kind that fills your house with noise, but also with life. Being a single dad wasn't how I pictured my future, but it's what life handed me after my marriage with Rachel fell apart. We'd met in college, young and wild, thinking love was enough to fix everything. For a while it was, but over time, Rachel started resenting the life we built. She wanted more money, more excitement, more everything. I was just a teacher, a man who valued stability over flash. She wanted the opposite. When she left, she didn't just walk out on me. She walked out on our family. She remarried soon after, to a man who could give her the kind of luxury she always thought she deserved. She'd call the boys once in a while, birthdays, holidays, but her voice always felt like it came from another world. The boys learned not to expect much. I tried not to let my resentment show, but every time she forgot a promise or skipped a call, I could see the disappointment in Logan's eyes, and it cut deep. My parents lived only 15 minutes away, but they might as well have been on another planet. My father, Thomas, believed success was measured in money and titles. In his eyes, being a teacher meant I'd failed at life. My mother just went along with whatever he said, her silence as sharp as his criticism. When Rachel left, I thought maybe they'd step in to help, but they only pulled further away. "You made your choices, Dylan," my dad told me once when I asked him to watch the twins. "Handle it yourself." So I did. I learned not to depend on anyone. And even with all that distance and disappointment, my world still felt full because of my kids. Every morning, their laughter filled that cramped apartment. Their cereal arguments, their shoes by the door, it was chaos, but it was mine. My days blurred together, teaching teenagers about wars and revolutions, then rushing home to make dinner, check homework, and tuck the twins into bed. Afterward, Logan and I would sit quietly on the balcony, talking about everything and nothing while the night settled around us. I was always tired, but it was the kind of tired that meant something. When Logan first started complaining about headaches, I brushed it off. I figured it was just school stress or too much screen time. But when he began to stumble, when his vision blurred and dizziness hit him out of nowhere, I told myself it was just fatigue. I didn't want to believe it was something worse. Then one night, as he reached for a glass of water, he collapsed. I still hear the sound of it sometimes, the crash of the glass, the thud as his body hit the floor. Panic took over before thought could. I scooped him up and drove to the hospital, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. That night was when everything started to fall apart. The doctors ran test after test. Their faces gave nothing away, their voices calm in that practiced, professional way that always means something's wrong. Then came the words no parent should ever have to hear: a tumor, brain cancer. It felt like the world stopped. I gripped the side of Logan's hospital bed, staring at his pale face, unable to accept what I'd just heard. He was only 14. He still talked about seeing the Grand Canyon, building rockets, growing up. My boy who loved the stars was suddenly fighting a disease that threatened to erase his light. From that moment, everything else, my job, my ex-wife, my father's disapproval, just disappeared. None of it mattered anymore. There was only the fight to keep my son alive. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The hospital became our second home. I learned to sleep in waiting room chairs, to live off vending machine coffee. The smell of antiseptic and the beeping of monitors became part of me. Doctors handed me treatment plans and pamphlets filled with medical jargon I couldn't process. Surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, none of it guaranteed. I nodded like I understood, but all I saw was my son lying there, his eyes dim with exhaustion, and all I could think was, how am I supposed to hold my family together when everything is falling apart? The problem wasn't just the cancer, it was life itself. I was a single dad with a full-time job and 3 kids, one of them fighting for his life. The twins, Asher and Eli, were only 5. They still needed bedtime stories, warm meals, and someone to kiss their scraped knees. I couldn't leave them alone, but I also couldn't abandon Logan in the hospital. Every morning, I woke up torn in two, desperate to be in 2 places at once and failing in both. At first, I tried to make it work on my own. I brought coloring books and toy cars to the hospital so the twins could play on the floor of the waiting room while I sat beside Logan's bed. Their laughter echoed through the halls, clashing with the sound of crying families and the squeak of nurses' shoes. The staff was kind. They'd sneak the boys' juice boxes or keep an eye on them when I needed to talk to the doctors. But deep down I knew I couldn't keep it up. The twins needed stability, not hospital corridors. So I did the one thing I swore I wouldn't. I called my parents. It was late when I picked up the phone. My hands were trembling. My voice shot from days without real sleep. "Mom, Dad," I said, trying to sound steady. "I need help. Logan's treatments start tomorrow, and I can't bring the twins every time. Can you please watch them a few days a week?" There was a long pause. Then my mother's voice, soft but hesitant. "Dylan, we're too old for that kind of responsibility. You know how your father feels." A moment later, my father took the phone. His tone was cold and clipped. "Dylan, you made your choices. You chose to be a teacher. You chose to marry that woman. You chose to have kids. It's not our job to fix your mistakes." "Dad," I said, the words breaking loose faster than I could control. "This isn't about me, it's about Logan. He's dying. I can't do this alone." "You've been coddled long enough," he snapped. "Figure it out." Then the line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone like it might come back to life. The silence was heavy, suffocating. My parents lived 15 minutes away, yet it felt like they were on another planet. They had just turned their backs on their own grandchildren. That night, after I got the twins to sleep, I sat alone in the dark. Logan was at the hospital, and I was surrounded by a quiet that felt like punishment. Every memory of my father's disappointment, every word of criticism, echoed in my head. And now I knew for sure, they hadn't just given up on me. They'd given up on us. Still, I couldn't stop trying. I had one last option. Rachel. Calling her was the last thing I wanted to do, but desperation leaves no pride. My stomach churned as I dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was sharp and impatient. "What do you want, Dylan?" I took a breath. "Rachel, it's Logan. He's getting worse. I need to be at the hospital with him, and I can't keep dragging the twins there. They need someone to watch them. Please, I'm begging you." There was a pause, then a short, cold laugh. "You're serious? You want me to play babysitter because you can't handle your own life? You're still a broke teacher, Dylan. Figure it out." My throat tightened. "Rachel," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "He's your son too. He doesn't have much time." "Please, Rachel," I said quietly. "Do it for him, if not for me." Her voice went cold. "I've moved on from that life, Dylan. You should too." Then she hung up. I just sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, unable to move. My chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. I wasn't asking her for money or forgiveness, just for help with our children, and she laughed. That's when it hit me. I was completely alone. No parents willing to step in. No ex-wife who cared. No safety net waiting to catch me. It was me against the storm. So I kept bringing the twins to the hospital, their little backpacks stuffed with snacks, crayons, and toys. I tried to be a father to them and a caretaker to Logan at the same time, but it was tearing me apart. Some nights, I held Logan's hand as he drifted into restless sleep, while Asher and Eli curled up in the visitor chairs beside me, too tired to stay awake. I'd sit there, my heart split in three, praying for strength I didn't have. Every morning, I woke up more exhausted. Every night, as I watched my son's body weaken, I wondered how long I could keep this up before I finally broke. And then came the night the world stopped. Outside the hospital, rain hammered the windows. Thunder rolled like the sky itself was grieving. Inside, I sat by Logan's bedside, gripping his hand, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. His bright eyes, the ones that once looked at the stars with wonder, fluttered open one last time. He smiled faintly, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, don't be sad. Promise me you'll take care of Asher and Eli." I swallowed hard, forcing strength into a voice that was already breaking. "I promise, son," I said. He nodded, closed his eyes, and a few minutes later, he was gone. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that crushes you. My boy, my firstborn, was gone. I laid my head on his chest and sobbed until there was nothing left, my tears soaking into his hospital gown. After the funeral, I moved through life like a ghost. The twins were too young to understand what had happened. They asked where their brother was, and when I told them he'd gone to heaven, they cried for a few minutes before wrapping their arms around me, looking for comfort I could barely give. I tried to stay strong for them, but inside I was hollow. At night, after they fell asleep, I'd sit in the living room staring at the ceiling while the silence pressed in on me. Logan's telescope still stood by the balcony, pointed toward the stars he'd never see again. I started to wonder if maybe I should join him. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of pills in front of me. My hands trembled as I twisted off the cap. Memories flooded in. Logan's laughter, his endless questions about the universe, the way he'd hug me out of nowhere. All I could think was I failed him. I couldn't save my son. I couldn't protect him. I was too weak for this world. And then, just as I was about to make a decision I could never take back, I heard small footsteps. Asher stood in the doorway, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice was so small, so innocent, but it hit me like a lightning strike. I slid the bottle out of sight and forced a shaky smile. "I'm okay, buddy," I said. "Why are you awake?" "I had a bad dream," he whispered, climbing into my lap. "I dreamed you left me and Eli." Those words shattered me. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him tight, feeling the warmth of his little body against mine. A moment later, Eli wandered in too, dragging his blanket behind him. He climbed onto my other knee and rested his head on my chest. The three of us sat there in the dim kitchen light, wrapped around each other. Eli's voice came out muffled against my shirt. "Daddy, please don't go away too." That was it. The dam inside me broke. I held them tighter, tears streaming down my face. And right there I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going anywhere. They had already lost one brother. They weren't going to lose their father too. Logan was gone, but Asher and Eli were still here. They still needed me. That night became the turning point. I took the bottle of pills, walked to the bathroom, and flushed them down the toilet. Watching them disappear felt like reclaiming my life. I was choosing to live, not for me, but for them. The days that followed were still heavy with grief. Some mornings I didn't want to get out of bed, but I made myself move. I started small. Breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast. A walk to the park. The boys' laughter cut through my sadness like sunlight breaking through clouds. At night, I tucked them in and told them stories about their brother, the boy who loved the stars, so his memory would never fade. I even went back to teaching. Every step into the classroom felt like walking through mud, but I did it. My students saw the difference in me, the exhaustion I tried to hide, but the routine helped. Teaching gave me something solid to hold on to when everything else felt like it could collapse. Bit by bit, I started rebuilding myself, not because I was strong, but because I didn't have a choice. Asher and Eli needed a father who kept his word. They needed love, stability, and someone to guide them through the world. And I was determined to be that man. The boys needed a father who would stand firm in the storm, someone who wouldn't be swept away. And as I clung to that thought, something shifted inside me. A tiny spark of hope began to glow, a fragile thing, barely noticeable, but real. I couldn't bring Logan back, but I could honor him by keeping the promise I'd made at his bedside. To live, to be there for Asher and Eli. A week later, just as I was starting to find my footing, there came a knock at the door. It was late in the evening. The twins were playing with blocks in the living room, their laughter echoing through the apartment. I hesitated. Who could possibly be visiting? Visitors were rare. Rachel hadn't spoken to me since laughing in my face, and my parents had disappeared from my life entirely. Maybe it was a neighbor complaining about noise. I opened the door. A man stood there, a stranger. Late 40s, tall, streaks of gray in his hair, and eyes that were both kind and unsettled as they met mine. He gripped a leather folder so tightly his knuckles were white. "Are you Dylan Keaton?" he asked, steady but nervous. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" "My name is Michael Dorsey," he said, taking a careful breath. "I believe I'm your brother." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My brain froze. I stared at him, waiting for the explanation, the joke, anything that would make sense. My father had never mentioned another child. My mother had never hinted at such a thing. It seemed impossible, absurd even. Yet the man before me radiated sincerity. "My brother?" I repeated sharply. Michael nodded. "I know this is a shock. I didn't know about you either, not until a few years ago. Our father, Thomas, had an affair when he was younger. My mother raised me on her own. I grew up knowing nothing about him, nothing about you. But when I started digging into our family history, I found his name, and eventually, yours." Anger bubbled up, not at Michael, but at Thomas. The man who raised me, judged me, belittled me, withheld love, and slammed the door in my face while my son was dying. He had a secret, a son he never acknowledged, while treating me like nothing. I gripped the doorframe so tight my knuckles hurt. "Why are you here now?" Michael lowered his eyes briefly, then met mine. "I heard about Logan. I know I'm too late to meet him, and I'm sorry. You don't owe me anything, but I couldn't stay silent. I wanted to meet you, and I want you to know, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. I have the means to help, and more than that, I want to be here for you and the boys." Behind him, Asher and Eli peeked around the corner. "Daddy, who is it?" Eli asked. I looked back at Michael, conflicted. My first instinct screamed to slam the door, to reject another complicated truth. But something in his eyes stopped me. He wasn't seeking redemption for himself. He was offering a lifeline. "Come inside," I said finally, my voice low. Michael stepped into the apartment, his gaze falling on the boys. He knelt down, eye to eye with them, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Hi there, I'm Michael." Asher tilted his head, skeptical but curious. "Are you Daddy's friend?" Michael hesitated, glanced at me. I gave a small nod. "Something like that," he said softly. Satisfied, the boys returned to their blocks, laughter filling the room again. Michael watched them quietly for a moment, then turned to me. "I can't replace what you've lost," he said. But I've spent my whole life wondering where I came from, if I had family out there somewhere. And now, standing here, I think maybe we were both missing something. You needed someone, and I needed a place to belong. I can't undo the past, but I can be here now. I expected anger, resentment, to push him away, but instead, I felt relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't completely alone. This unexpected brother had come when everyone else had walked away. The weight of grief, betrayal, and loneliness pressed on me, but it didn't crush me. Not entirely. I could breathe again. Sit down, I said, gesturing toward the couch. We have a lot to talk about. As we sat in the small apartment, the twins building towers at our feet, I realized the knock at the door wasn't just an interruption. It was a beginning. Michael's presence didn't erase the loss of Logan or the betrayal of my parents and Rachel, but it brought something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. That night, after he left with a promise to return, I stood on the balcony and looked through Logan's telescope. The stars stretched endlessly above, the same ones he had loved so much. For the first time since his death, I whispered to the night, "We're going to be okay, son." True to his word, Michael returned the next day. He didn't come empty-handed: groceries, children's books, and even a box of Legos for the twins. He greeted the twins by name, already remembering which one was Asher and which was Eli. They ran straight to him with that fearless joy only kids have, dragging him down to the floor to build towers and castles out of blocks. I watched from the kitchen doorway, unsure how to feel. Part of me still recoiled at the thought of letting anyone tied to my father step into my life. My anger toward Thomas hadn't faded, and maybe it never would. But as I saw Michael laugh with my sons, his face open and full of real joy, I realized he wasn't the one who'd caused all that pain. He was there because he wanted to be, not because he had to. In the weeks that followed, Michael became part of our daily rhythm. He'd stop by after work, help me make dinner, and sometimes watch the twins so I could breathe for a minute. He even went with me to the cemetery, standing silently while I placed fresh flowers on Logan's grave. He didn't try to fix my pain or offer hollow comfort. He just stood beside me, steady and present, and somehow that meant everything. The boys adored him. They started calling him Uncle John, a name that made his eyes glisten every time. He read them bedtime stories, carried them on his shoulders at the park, and answered their endless questions about life and heaven. When Asher asked if Logan could still see them, Michael knelt down and said, "I believe he can, and I think he's proud of all of you." I'd spent so long feeling abandoned that real support felt foreign. At first, I resisted it, convinced that if I leaned too hard on anyone, they'd eventually leave like everyone else had. But Michael never left. He kept showing up until I started to believe he might actually stay. It wasn't just his presence that helped. It was what his presence reminded me of. For years, I'd measured my worth through my father's cold indifference and my ex-wife's contempt. I'd let their rejection define who I thought I was. But watching my sons laugh with their uncle, seeing Michael invest himself in a family he'd only just met, I realized I'd been wrong about what family means. Family isn't just blood. It's who chooses to stand beside you when everything falls apart. My parents had turned away. Rachel had mocked me when I was breaking. But Michael, a man who owed me nothing, had stepped into the wreckage and stayed. Healing didn't happen overnight. Grief still came in waves, sometimes fierce enough to knock me off my feet. There were nights I sat beside the telescope, crying until I couldn't anymore, and mornings I woke up wishing it was all just a bad dream. But little by little, I found strength in the promise I'd made to Logan. I poured my heart into raising Asher and Eli, teaching them kindness, courage, and love. With Michael's help, I began to believe that maybe we really would be okay. One evening, the four of us sat on the balcony as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky. The twins took turns looking through the telescope, squealing when they spotted the moon. Michael leaned back, smiling as they argued about whose turn it was next. I sat there quietly, watching them, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I thought about Logan, how much he would have loved this, and I felt him there with us in the laughter. "I kept my promise, son," I whispered. Then I turned to Michael. "Thank you for being here. You don't know what this means to us." He looked at me, steady and sure. "No, Dylan, you don't know what this means to me. I've spent my whole life searching for family. I never thought I'd find it like this. You saved me too." In that moment, I finally understood. Loss had broken me. Betrayal had scarred me. But love, unexpected, undeserved, unconditional, had found a way back in. The people who hurt us don't define us. The people who choose to love us anyway, that's where real family lives. That night, after the twins fell asleep and the apartment went quiet, I stood on the balcony again. The stars shimmered above, endless and calm. For the first time since Logan's death, I didn't feel just grief. I felt gratitude. I had lost my son, but not my purpose. I'd gained a brother I never knew existed, and together we were building something new, something that honored Logan's memory. That's what I carry with me now. No matter how dark life gets, there's always light waiting to be found. Sometimes in the last place you expect. Sometimes it's a knock at the door. Sometimes it's a stranger who turns out to be family. And sometimes it's the reminder that love can still find you, even when you've lost everything. That's my story. I lost my son. I was abandoned by the people I thought I could count on. I almost gave up, but I chose to live for my boys. And when I opened that door, I learned that family isn't always who you're born with. It's who stays when the storm hits. If this story moved you, give it a like so others can find it. Share it with someone who needs to know that hope can still reach them, even in their darkest moment. Leave a comment below. I read every single one, and your words matter more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Remember, you are never truly alone.